Regina K. Walters was born on May 5, 1975 in Harris County, Texas, to Jerry and Carolyn Walters, and was the youngest of 3 children. Friends and family described her as intelligent, adventurous, and full of energy. By her early teens, she often sought independence and adventure, which ultimately drew her into the company of 18-year-old Ricky Jones. Ricky himself had grown up with significant instability. His parents divorced in 1977, and he and his siblings were eventually removed from their home by Child Protective Services. Much of his youth was spent in shelters and foster care, and as he grew older, he began to have run-ins with the law. By 1990, Ricky was living in Jacinto City, Texas, and was on probation for auto theft. According to one of Ricky's friends, he and Regina first met near her mother's apartment complex in Pasadena, Texas, on Saturday, February 2nd, 1990. The 2 teenagers formed an instant connection, and Regina promised to meet him again the next evening. True to her word, she saw him again on Sunday, February 3rd. That night, Regina left her mother's apartment and did not return, instead spending time with Ricky and his friends at an apartment nearby. At the time, Regina's mother believed her daughter had gone out only briefly to return a key to a family she babysat for. When she did not come back or call, which was unusual for Regina, her mother quickly became concerned and filed a missing person report. She later learned that Regina had not gone to see the babysitting family at all, but had instead chosen to meet with Ricky. Over the following days, Regina and Ricky stayed with friends and acquaintances. While out, they noticed missing person flyers with Regina's photo that her mother had posted on store windows around Pasadena. Seeing those flyers alarmed Ricky. He realised for the first time the full seriousness of the situation. Regina was only 14 years old, and as an adult already on probation, his involvement with her could lead to new criminal charges and likely jail time. Despite his fears, Regina refused to be left behind. She insisted that she and Ricky remain together, even as the risks grew. Faced with this, Ricky agreed, and the 2 devised a plan to run away permanently. They decided they would hitchhike south to Mexico, where Ricky had relatives, and begin a new life together away from the watchful eyes of Regina's family and the authorities. Thus, on the night of February 3rd, 1990, Regina Walters ran away from home for the last time. Although her mother acted quickly to try to bring her back, Regina chose to stay with Ricky. What began as an impulsive teenage romance soon turned into a desperate attempt to escape legal trouble and parental intervention, ultimately setting the pair on a dangerous and tragic path. On March 16, 1990, Regina's father received a phone call from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The following day at 1:15 p.m, the unidentified caller contacted him again, this time from Ennis, Texas, to taunt him about Regina's whereabouts. During the conversation, the unidentified man claimed that he had cut Regina's hair short. When her father asked whether she was still alive, the caller abruptly hung up without providing an answer. The caller later contacted Regina's mother twice, concealing his identity while claiming he wanted to personally update her on her daughter's location. He instructed her to meet him at a convenience store at 6:30 a.m. the next morning, but failed to appear. Law enforcement traced the call to a payphone near the same Ennis location from which he had called her father. Approximately 2 weeks later, Regina's mother received another anonymous call from the same man, again requesting a meeting at the convenience store. Once more, he did not appear. The call was traced to a payphone just a few blocks away from the designated meeting location. On September 29, 1990, approximately 7 months after the pair disappeared, a farmer located near Greenville, Illinois, reported a disturbing discovery. In the loft of a barn, the farmer found a nude and partially decomposed body of a young female. Lieutenant Wayne Watson of the Illinois State Police said that the young female had likely been killed in early March of that year. An autopsy confirmed that she had been strangled to death, and the girl was positively identified as Regina Walters. Investigators with the FBI carefully evaluated Ricky as a possible suspect in Regina's murder, but ultimately ruled him out. Their reasoning was that if Ricky had been responsible, the crime scene would almost certainly have reflected chaos or impulsivity, the kind of disorganisation expected when a killing results from a heated conflict or emotional outburst. In contrast, the scene of Regina's death showed signs of deliberate control and methodical planning. Evidence at the site revealed that Regina's clothing had been removed, her hair had been cut, and she had been strangled with a ligature. None of these actions were necessary to cause her death, which suggested a calculated effort to dominate, humiliate, and exert power over her, rather than an act of panic or rage. These details convinced profilers that her killer was not Ricky, but rather someone with a more practiced and predatory nature. The FBI built a profile pointing to a middle-aged white man who likely worked in an occupation involving frequent travel, such as long-haul trucking or business that required constant movement from one place to another. This profile aligned with the evidence of planning and mobility connected to Regina's disappearance and murder. At the same time, authorities began to consider the possibility that Ricky himself had also fallen victim. Since he vanished alongside Regina, investigators searched for any unidentified remains that could match his description. It transpired that on May 26, 1990, close to the Little Cypress Bayou near Harleton, Texas, skeletal remains of a young male were found. Some speculated that these remains might belong to Ricky, but forensic testing at the same time could not confirm a match. FBI investigators eventually connected details from Regina's murder to another case involving an 18-year-old hitchhiker who had narrowly escaped from a Robert Rhodes in January 1990. That young woman had been abducted at a California truck stop and endured days of sexual torture inside the sleeper cabin of Rhodes's semi-truck before she managed to flee. The similarities between her ordeal and Regina's case caught the FBI's attention. While Robert Rhodes was in custody in Arizona for the sexual assault of a 27-year-old woman, his landlord discovered disturbing items in his residence, including women's clothing and undergarments, blood-stained white towels, makeup, photographs, and various bondage materials. These discoveries prompted the FBI to obtain a warrant to search Rhodes's apartment in Texas, which they executed on April 6, 1990. During the search, the investigators recovered numerous photographs depicting a white female with short, dark, uneven hair. The images spanned several weeks and showed the woman in different stages of undress, often restrained and subjected to sexual torture. Many of the photos were taken inside the sleeper cabin and passenger seat of Rhodes's semi-truck, while others depicted the same female inside and outside a barn. At the time, authorities were unable to identify the young woman in the photographs. However, investigators treated the images as critical evidence, believing that the female depicted had been an unwilling participant in the abuse and had been subjected to Rhodes's premeditated and methodical acts of sexual violence. In October 1991, one of the agents showed these photographs to Regina's father. He immediately identified the young girl as his daughter. The background in the photos also matched the abandoned barn where Regina's remains were later discovered, further cementing the link to Rhodes. The physical evidence recovered from Rhodes's apartment left little doubt. Investigators located a London fog coat that Regina had been wearing on the night she vanished. They also found the very clothes she had on just before she was killed, along with a notebook that belonged to her. Inside the notebook were unsettling contents, a sketch of a gun, droplets of blood, and the chilling phrase, quote, "Ricky's a dead man." This led agents to believe that Rhodes may have murdered Ricky before turning his violence towards Regina. Rhodes held Regina captive for a minimum of 2 weeks, during which he subjected her to extreme abuse. He shaved her head and pubic area, pierced her with fishing hooks, and forced her to wear a black dress and heels while photographing her in states of fear and distress. Ultimately, he strangled her to death using a garrote fashioned from baling wire, leaving her roughly 100-pound body to decompose in a barn near Interstate 70 in Illinois. The body of a male was discovered in a deep ditch near Highway 59 in Lamar County, Mississippi, on March 3, 1991, having died from a gunshot wound to the head. For many years, he remained unidentified, listed as a John Doe. In 2008, DNA testing was conducted on his remains in an effort to establish his identity. The results were eventually matched to his mother, confirming that the remains were indeed Ricky Jones's. In July 2008, the Doe Network officially announced Ricky's identification on their website. Despite widespread belief that Robert Rhodes was responsible for Ricky's murder, Rhodes was never formally charged due to insufficient evidence. Further scrutiny of Rhodes's trucking records added to suspicions. His official logs from early March 1990 showed mileage inconsistencies along routes through West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. According to company records, he should have logged many more miles than he did, suggesting that he had spent significant time stopped for reasons unrelated to work. The FBI compared these gaps with photographs taken of Regina inside the sleeper cab of Rhodes's 1985 International cabover, finding they were a match. The timeline became even clearer when investigators aligned Rhodes's movements with phone calls made to Regina's parents. On March 16, 1990, a call to her father came from a payphone at an Oklahoma City truck stop, the same location where Rhodes had purchased fuel that very day. By the next day, his logs placed him in Ennis, Texas. Additional witness testimony reinforced the case against him. In 1992, a loading dock foreman in Mount Pulaski, Illinois, recalled a delivery made by Rhodes on March 7, 1990. He specifically remembered because Rhodes was accompanied by a young girl with short, uneven, dark hair. From his position on the dock, the foreman noticed the girl standing beside Rhodes's truck and thought she looked distressed. At the time, he chose not to report it. Years later, when shown a photograph of Regina by the FBI, he confirmed that she was the same girl he'd seen with Rhodes that day. Robert Rhodes, known as the truck stop killer, is confirmed to have tortured and murdered at least 2 couples in Illinois and Texas in 1989 and 1990, and is suspected of abducting, sexually assaulting, and killing dozens of women between 1975 and 1990, based on his truck routes and the profiles of missing women. Rhodes claimed to have committed such crimes for 15 years, often using the sleeper cab of his truck as a mobile torture chamber where he held women for days or weeks. Unearthing his past, it was revealed that after graduating high school in 1964, Rhodes joined the Marine Corps but was dishonorably discharged following a robbery. That same year, his father was arrested for assaulting a 12-year-old girl and later took his own life while awaiting trial. Rhodes briefly attended college but dropped out, and attempts to enter law enforcement were blocked due to his military record. He married 3 times and had 1 son with his first wife, working in various jobs before becoming a long-haul trucker. By the 1980s, Rhodes had developed an interest in BDSM, and during this period he allegedly abused his 3rd wife, Deborah, both verbally and physically. In 1989, Rhodes picked up hitchhikers Candace Walsh, 24, and her husband, Douglas Zykowski, 26, both from Seattle, Washington. He killed Douglas immediately in Texas and held Candace captive for over a week, torturing and sexually abusing her before murdering her in Utah. Candace's remains were not identified until 2003, while Douglas's body was identified in 1992. Less than a month after Candace's death, Rhodes abducted 18-year-old Shayna Holtz, who managed to escape and later informed police, though she declined to press charges out of fear, as well as the possibility that she wouldn't be believed. On April 1st, 1990, Arizona State Trooper Mike Miller discovered a nude, handcuffed woman screaming inside Rhodes's truck, which was parked by Interstate 10 near Casa Grande, Arizona. Rhodes was arrested and charged with sexual assault, unlawful imprisonment, and aggravated assault. Following the arrest, investigators discovered photographs in his home of captive women, including Regina Walters and Candace Walsh, linking him to multiple murders. He was later extradited to Utah for the Walsh and Zajkowski case, but charges were dropped at the family's request to avoid additional testimony. Rhodes also pleaded guilty in Texas to the murders of Regina Walters and Ricky Jones, receiving a second life sentence. Rhodes remains incarcerated at Menard Correctional Center in Chester, Illinois, serving life without parole.